Network Next Gen, the podcast, inspiring design industry hustlers.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us for the Network Next Gen podcast. Today, we are talking with two of our Next Geners from San Francisco, Ammee and Lauren. I'm so excited that you guys could join us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
thanks.
Okay, so we'll start out. If you both could just give a quick little background on you, kind of similar to the Geners, your design origin story, and we can go from there. So Ammee, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I'm a senior project designer at Perkins and Will. I just started there. I just came up actually on my 1 year working there. Previously, I was at SOM, and I came here basically accepting a job from Utah. There I worked for probably like 6 years, and now I'm rolling on my 5-year anniversary here as well. So definitely steamrolling the industry right now. But yeah, just I think right now I'm working on some really good projects that are happening in SOMA and actually in San Francisco locally. So it's pretty exciting to kind of see some industry rise outside of the financial district. So pretty excited to see that happen. But yeah.
Nice. I bet Utah and San Francisco are quite different.
Very different.
What are the what's one main difference between the design industry in Utah and San Francisco?
I mean, it's kind of apples and oranges. I mean, it's the size of city. The projects that go up are just on a whole different scale, which was kind of one of the big draws for me in coming out. Not just here, but just outside of Utah. It was kind of a long-winded story of how I ended up in San Francisco. But yeah, I was drawn to a larger city because I wanted more complex projects, bigger projects. It could be similar, whether it's core and shell and commercial, but I wanted something that was just larger. So obviously working in San Francisco, I've touched on projects that are in Taiwan, 300 meters tall, like all sorts of stuff. So it's definitely given me what I wanted and making the transition.
Oh, that's so awesome. And what about you, Miss Lauren? Love to hear your background.
Yeah, my name is Lauren Perich. I'm a senior interior designer at Studio O+A. I've been at O+A and in San Francisco for about 4.5 years, approaching 5 years, doing primarily workplace design. I relocated about 5 years ago from Boston. And I'm originally from Southern New Hampshire, and I started my career in between Boston and New York City. So I made the change to come over to the West Coast and kind of shake it up and have a new perspective and be surrounded by new perspectives. And it's been great. I've really appreciated the change and the shakeup that I was looking for. But I think pretty early on in my career, when I was exposed to workplace design, I definitely found a passion in workplace design. I see it as a kind of the perfect blend for me to do something creative and something that's rooted in psychology and also rooted in kind of technical problem solving. So it's the perfect blend for me in that sense. And it's been great. I was looking to kind of shake things up, like I said, when I moved out here, and O+A is made up of a really talented group of workplace designers and graphic designers. So I feel really fortunate to be working here.
Yeah. Oh, so awesome. And Boston and New York, also two cities that we're in. So it's so fun seeing where everyone kind of ends up, especially after the pandemic. There's so many switches. And what's really cool is we're able to get you plugged back into the Next Gen network after you've joined us for a dinner. So it's fun just to, hear about these different cities. So we'll just do a quick little flashback of the dinner. We were at Leo's Oyster Bar in downtown San Francisco. What's the area called? I totally blanked. Was it
Financial District?
Financial District, pretty central, but super cute. Oh yeah, because it was very nondescript on the outside. And then as you came in, it was super intimate, kind of jazz bar vibes. I don't know.
San Francisco has a lot of places like that where you're not quite sure that it's even there. from the sidewalk, but then once you know where you're going, you find yourself in this really like magical garden or like where we were in a private dining room. And there's a lot of great spots like that around the city.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's what's nice about like the similarity between New York and say San Francisco, for instance, is that everything on the outside is kind of old, or what you might consider as like outdated or like kind of run down, divey, but it's actually really, it's a gem. Like everywhere you kind of go has its own vibe, its own gem. Like everybody, puts their heart and soul into it, whoever owns it, kind of a thing. And I think it's great. I love the eclectic nature of all of that.
Yeah, so true. They're always so awesome. The food was great.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear from you guys. What was your overall impression of the dinner? Was there anything that really stuck out just on a high level? And then we can dig deep into some of the topics that we talked about.
I mean, I think it was just nice to kind of have a little bit more of a gathering place for people, to be honest. I mean, while the San Francisco industry, like the design industry, is kind of talked about as being small, surprisingly, but it is actually sometimes hard, especially now with the work from home and the change for everybody kind of branching out to really gain that connection back again. And so for me, I actually kind of just liked having a little bit of a place where we can get those collective minds back together and just kind of talk, just brainstorm, talk about what's going on, what are you thinking, what's happening, what's good, what's bad. Because I think sometimes even right now we get hung up on just the tunnel vision of what's happening on my piece of paper, on my desk. And I personally like being able to hear from outside perspectives and their thoughts. So I really liked that.
Yeah, I think it's a unique forum type. I feel, and I don't know if it's about San Francisco in particular, or it's just my experience, but I've felt like exposure to other designers and other firms is a little bit more closed door than what I experienced in Boston. And so to have a forum where everyone's a designer, but at all various levels, felt like a great resource. So even if people are at various experience levels, it's still, and even I was surprised by how many people are so new to the industry.
Yeah.
A year and under some people. But immediately once it was kind of understood how many years of experience people mostly had in the room, I think that also helps kind of shape some of the questions and some of the answers too, and immediately kind of gave a dynamic to what the room is really looking for from each other. And it was really interesting to hear priorities from people, and even at no matter where you are in your career, there's always going to be kind of questions about work-life balance. And I think that that's interesting to talk through in a group of people with various experience levels.
Totally. And just from all the different firms, because it's really cool for us, we ask everyone, or a lot of people, we try to ask them if they recognize anyone in the room. And sometimes they'll recognize faces, sometimes they'll know a few people, but more than not, a lot of people don't know everyone who's there. So it's really cool seeing you guys share your stories, really unlock, get comfortable. And it is scary to ask some of these tough questions. So having the format of writing the questions in the notebook and having us ask them for everyone really helps to break down the barriers. So
for sure.
There were a few kind of topics that we talked a ton about: boundaries, burnout, growing within the firm, does it mean to break the glass ceiling of the paying your dues quotation mark. So I would love to just touch on some of these and just give a high level, because there were such interesting conversations that we had at the dinner that night. So we really started off with boundaries, and I'd love to hear your guys's kind of feedback and thoughts on that topic.
Can I kick it off? Well, I mean, thinking back to what we talked about, I mean, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to remember everything, and kind of replay it back here, but so some of this might be kind of new based on what we what we had already talked about. But I do know, like, one of the things that I had kind of said, which I felt like I picked up on a couple of faces reacting, perhaps, was when I had said I had gone into an interview, and one of the first things that I had asked, or what I had told them, it wasn't even a question so much as I was telling them that I wanted to leave every day at like 4:30. And like, that was kind of a deal breaker for me. That was like, you either have to be okay with that or not. But that's kind of like, I say that kind of knowing, though, that that ran with a risk. And it was a risk that I had to be willing to take. And I think that is kind of a really interesting thing to break down when you're trying to talk about boundaries, because easily someone could have replied back and said, wow, that's extremely pushy. And the answer is no. So, but for me, I had to really ask myself where I stood on that, and why I wanted to have this boundary, and why it was so important for me to hold it, and be able to justify that those that didn't accept it, for whatever reason, that it wasn't personal, it's a business, but that it was something that I also needed to hold, because I have my own things, my own business, my own career aspirations that I'm trying to uphold. And in order to do that, this is what I need. So it was kind of this dynamic I had to go through on my own to kind of understand why I was asking it. But once I did that, it did work, and they responded well, and they gave me what I wanted, and it was never an issue at that point. So, I mean, that's kind of where I start when I talk about boundaries, is that example. I mean, for good or bad, I guess,
Yeah.
but
Such a good example.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think as designers get more and more in tune with what their personal journey looks like, what they want, what they need, what's going to make them happy, and they've established themselves and are confident in their skills, they'll gain more confidence to ask for those kinds of things in interviews. Or even to do it in an interview is ideal, because it sets the tone and sets expectations early on. But I also think it's okay to have those conversations in the middle of your journey with a firm too, if things have changed. I think a lot of firm or leaders in general should know that people's priorities change depending on their personal lives too. And that leaders should be constantly checking in with their staff to kind of know what's important to them. Sometimes 1 year it could be money, the next year it could be time, and it'll shift depending on what's happening in your personal life. But I think that's a muscle that every designer needs to exercise at some point in their career. And you can kind of get into that more when you're in the intermediate to senior level. But when you're in the junior and entry level position, I'm empathetic. It's challenging, because I remember being in that position and working a lot of hours to pay my dues and build trust with my leaders so that they would give me more opportunities and exposure. And ultimately, it ended up, I wouldn't change anything about my path, but in the same sense, I think I don't think that's necessarily a great thing to kind of abuse and burn out junior staff, because they know, leaders know that that's what they're looking to do. I think, I was having this conversation the other day with even other industries too. This is not an industry specific issue. There's a lot of feelings like junior or new or entry level people need to pay their dues. And I think that phrase is a challenging one, and it's starting to not feel good to hear that phrase anymore, because ultimately I think where it comes from is a lot of people expect that newer people are going to just have to deal with the same struggle that they went through when they were in their kind of younger days in their career. And they feel like you should deal with the same challenges that I dealt with. But I don't think that is the right message. I think ultimately, if there's a better way, everyone should support that better way. And if that means that, younger generations coming into the workforce have better work-life balance and mental health, that would make me happy. That would not make me kind of bitter about it. So whatever that we can do to help younger generations kind of build that confidence and establish those boundaries early on, the better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. That was the paying your dues was something that we had been talking about at the dinner. And I think you phrased it so well, is we can either decide to have the narrative of I suffer, you suffer, or obviously not everything is perfect, but let's do what we can to make it better for the person below us. I'm so curious from both of you, since you have been in the industry for a while, what helped you build confidence to have these conversations with your manager, with your workplace to create these boundaries?
Trial and error.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually kind of think what maybe you and I, Lauren, have gone through might actually be different than those coming up underneath us. And I say that because our immediate interaction is with the leadership up above us, right? Which is very different than those coming under us who are going to interact with you and I, right?
Right. The day to day. Yep.
Yeah. So I actually think you and I having this conversation, with Kelsey and everybody else, right? That this conversation is actually going to be a lot different than what you and I think experienced. Hopefully for the better. But that's why I say trial and error, because I think that I've definitely had a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but I've had a number of instances where advocating for myself or setting a boundary or trying to do mental health days didn't happen the way I wanted them to, that it turned out negatively, or I was worried that it was going to, impact me negatively in my career. So there were definitely a lot of things that I went through in terms of adjusting how I approached things, how I reacted to things, how I took things. But I think back to what you were saying, though, Lauren, that this kind of dynamic between the conversation of those coming up, the junior staff, and then even us, the leadership, having those conversations back to them and advocating for them to speak up, and also us reaching back down to encourage that, right? I think that that's the new conversation and discussion that we're going to have. So
I think when you're exercising that muscle and building that confidence, a lot of that has to do with the conversations you have with people, the mentor and mentee relationship that you build, other people's stories of trial and error, and also figuring out, half the battle is figuring out what you're going to ask for. Half the battle is figuring out even what you want. So I think you need to build your confidence in what's important to you first, which doesn't come easy. And it's not even going to be figured out early on in your career. Yeah. But if you can, that's kind of your personal growth journey that I think a lot of people undervalue. But establishing what is important to you at the phase that you're in is half the battle. And then advocating for yourself is also really important. And the more conversations you have with people, the better you'll be at it. I think also one thing I want people to understand is there's not, sometimes when you're kind of a junior designer, that there's this perception that leadership is this like cloud of people who feel some way about you. But really it's so made up of individual personalities that have their own viewpoints, their own experience. One leader might think one way, the next leader might think a different way. So even if you have, or your day-to-day manager is going to be different than ultimately the office leader too. And there's going to be differences from person to person. So even if you start kind of exercising those boundaries and maybe it doesn't go so well in the beginning, don't let that deflate yourself or make yourself think that you did something wrong or you shouldn't pursue it anymore. There's a lot of different leadership styles out there, and they're so linked to people's personality types that don't let one leader or one person have that much power over your ultimate approach to work-life balance and boundaries, because you might do it the exact same way to another person, another leader, another daily manager, and you might be more successful.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that real quick, because you're touching on something I also thought of later too, that when you're like this mentor, mentee kind of relationship, I actually want to encourage people to seek out and find that mentor. It doesn't just have to be the person that is directly on your project. I think just kind of is what happens, whether good or bad, but they're the person you see day to day, right? Or you see most often. That doesn't mean that they're actually the ones that are appropriate for your growth. A lot of the people that I actually specifically reach out to and ask to be my, what we call champions, I have chosen that. I have autonomy over that choice, and I'm actually seeking out these people on purpose to help champion me towards something I want to do. Not just build a building. I want to do sustainability. So I'm seeking this person out to help me go in that direction. So it's just to kind of add on exactly with already what you're saying, Lauren, but to encourage people to actually just go seek them out. If you're not getting what you need, find someone else.
Totally. Yeah. And something that we started to do at my office was have a daily manager who's kind of your director, who is more embedded in your project work, but then to also have a career manager who's maybe another person within leadership who's not part of your day-to-day, but they know what's important to you, and where you want to go in the big picture, so that you have an advocate at the table, both for the big picture and for your day-to-day kind of productivity and your general day-to-day growth.
Exactly.
One thing I also wanted to mention, and I know we talked about at the dinner too, was no one's going to give you permission to set boundaries. No one's going to say, okay, you can do that now. You've reached this point in your life and your career. Now you can do that.
Enter level boundary.
Yeah.
New boundary unlocked.
You made it. Yeah. Exactly. No one's going to say, hey, you're allowed to leave at 5, right? Or, hey, you're allowed to have that appointment in the middle of the day. It's just something that you're going to have to decide to do. And you're going to find moments where it's challenging. Especially when you're in an industry that you're passionate about. It's even more challenging if you're passionate about the work that you're doing, because it's hard to then step away from something that you're so interested and embedded in. But it's kind of the game of priorities, right? I mean, you have to associate things with what's a need to do today versus a can do tomorrow. And you're going to have to make the decisions yourself of when to step away, when to make space to have dinner with your family or whatever it is, but it's going to be a very personal decision to you.
Yeah. Really pulling back or realizing you have a lot of control of your mentors, of your boundaries. Of course, you have to have the courage to ask and put yourself out there or figure out what it really means for you. I'm looking at one of the questions here that was asked, and I feel like something that comes up a lot with boundaries is its best friend, burnout. And so one of the questions was, what is a good tip for dealing with burnout when taking vacation isn't an option, especially at a place that you'd like to stay long term? So I'd love to touch on burnout and maybe some tips that have worked for you or things that really haven't worked. That is always kind of helpful to hear too.
Well, I guess I would first probably just start with, why don't you have any option for vacation?
That's
Like
what I was gonna say.
that's maybe a red flag right there, that if like that's nowhere in the agreement, that maybe that's not where you want to be. Kind of again, back to the dynamic that it's not personal. If that's just what they want as a business, then you have the choice to work for them. And if that's not in line with what your values are, with what your boundaries want to be, then maybe that's not where you want to work. There's a lot of firms that do really good work. So it's not, I promise that that firm is not the only firm that will make you happy, kind of a thing. So I'll just put that out there first as a comment.
Totally.
And then were you gonna keep going, Amy?
Nope, go for it. Just thinking.
That was my first thought too. And then if for some reason there is a reason why you don't have available vacation days, you use them all because you took 2 months off to go to Mexico or whatever it was, but you're still feeling burnout and you still need some self-care time. I think it's really important to utilize your weekends to the fullest. I think being able to say, okay, the pencil's down until Monday, is important. I think especially in entry level and junior designers where they're coming out of school, they're coming out of college, and then all of a sudden the journey forward is this huge, like vast ocean of, wait a minute, I don't have a date on the calendar that I have to look forward to. Wait a minute, I don't have finals. I don't have like this next checkpoint in my journey. It's easy to feel burnout really quickly, because then it feels like all your time is just work. So I think something that's important is to utilize your weekends to the fullest. Make sure you do have separation from work on the weekends. Also within the week, I think it's really important to have micro breaks. So make sure that you're doing those like 10 minutes away from the computer where you go and just like stand outside for 5 minutes, and that will rejuvenate you. So there's dealing with burnout at a micro level and a macro level that I think needs balance, day to day, weekly, and then vacations. I also think, I mean, for me, it's important for me to have something on the calendar, even if it's a couple months out, for me to look forward to, whether that be as simple as a camping trip or a dinner with somebody, or a trip or something. But I think once your mindset kind of shifts to that, and it's no longer this big vast ocean of nothingness, then you're able to balance personal time and find the time for you. I don't think any firm, even if you don't have vacation days, I don't think any firm is going to come after you for taking breaks during the day and taking your weekends. And if they are, then again, to Amy's point, time to look for another spot.
Yeah. And I want to add on to that about this word popped in my head, rewards. Like it's kind of going with what you were saying, like having something on the calendar. I was recently talking to somebody about this and talking about rewards, that because everyone kind of struggles with this. I'll even admit I struggle with it sometimes. I'm not perfect. And like I'll meet a deadline, and that deadline to me is meant to be the reward. But sometimes that deadline doesn't give me what I'm looking for in that reward, because I hit the ground running the very next day or something like that, right? For something else. And so just re-emphasizing, identifying what rewards are to you, whether that's a trip, whether that's friends, whether that's, a solo hike, like whatever that wants to be, but identifying what's a reward to you and then doing that. Whether that's at the end of a deadline, or whether that's during the week, or whether, that's on the weekend, you made it through the week. Congrats. It is hard sometimes, like, those kinds of things. So that's actually something that I've tried to coin for myself, is like, what is my reward for doing this, and how am I going to treat myself for it? So
a glass of wine, preferably.
Right.
No, so true. It's so nice having those things to look forward to in your calendar and help you get there. Because in school, like you said, Lauren, it's so structured as far as, okay, we make it to here. Here's our midterms. Here's our finals. Check, check, check. And I think as designers, we are a little bit of checklist, get it done, go, go, go. So it's nice creating that structure for yourself. A lot of the questions that we also got to pivot a little bit was growing within a firm. So maybe dealing with difficult managers or being unsure what the path was. I'd love to hear what that looks like for you both or your experience so far.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of a personal, like, navigation for a lot of people. I mean, it just, depending on where you came from, what you're looking for. So I'm not sure that what I might say is going to really resonate with a ton of people, but maybe it will. But like, I'll say for me, especially in coming from Utah, I've always kind of felt like I've had a little bit of, you could say, imposter syndrome, or trying to, like, climb the ladder, because I didn't come from these big name schools. I mean, the University of Utah is actually very good. But it's not a name that you really hear, resonate across the board when you go and interview for firms and stuff like that. And so I feel like I've always felt like I've been trying to kind of climb my way up there and make a name for myself in a place that already has a ton of names that I might not already be on, the same playing field. But so I kind of just tried to talk confidence into myself usually, and trying to have these conversations with people like those, like what we were talking about earlier, these mentors that weren't necessarily my immediate managers, but trying to just hear perspectives from someone else, kind of what we're doing now. Like just asking older friends in other industries, weren't even architects or anything, but just like, you're a manager, what did you do? Like, how did you get to where you are? and just hearing perspectives, and just kind of taking what someone has said and applying it to my current situation. And I think that was just kind of the first approach that I did in trying to navigate and get to where I am. I also think just looking for places that you're going to fit in and get you what you want. I mean, that was, again, kind of why I reached outside of the state of Utah. I had these big ideas and big things and impacts I wanted to do to change really the industry. And in order to do that, I needed to have my hands in places, in firms that had a larger reach than I could go. So it was trying to find a firm that reciprocated that dynamic, that would give me a long leash, but would also give me the resources that I needed if I needed to get reined in, and help give me purpose and direction to achieve those goals. So I think it's just kind of not being afraid to seek out what you want, take that chance. And then if it doesn't work, it's scary, but having the courage to kind of go and find something else that's going to get you where you want to go.
Yeah, growth is tricky because, like Ammee said, it's very personal and there isn't one path. I think a lot of people have this misconception that there's one journey to growth, and there's not. I have worked at firms where the path to growth was very structured and very clear, and you move from designer 1 to designer 2 to designer 3, and these are how they're defined. These are the expectations of the roles. And growing in a structure like that is a little bit more clear, because anytime that and again, I mentioned this at the dinner, but advocating for yourself is everything. Rarely is anyone just going to hand you a promotion without some level of self-advocacy. But anytime I've self-advocated to grow in a structure like that, it's been pretty clear. I've been able to say, hey, I've been doing the description of this role for the last 6 months. And so I'm clearly doing it successfully. These are the reasons why I should be promoted. And that's been a little bit more straightforward than working at firms that don't have that sense of kind of structure and definition between roles. I think when you work at places that are a little bit less structured, a little bit more flat in hierarchy, it can be challenging to know what your growth path is. And I think some people get caught up in comparing yourself to the next person at the same level. And I've watched people do that a lot, and it's I understand why. Of course, you think, oh, I have the same years of experience, I have kind of the same skills and knowledge. Why are they being picked and not me, or vice versa? But I think something to just keep in mind is that a lot of growth is also very much tied to the relationships that you build with your leaders and the leadership style of those leaders. Is it a leader that you connect with? Is it a leader that empowers you? And that can change even within being in the same firm, just moving from under one manager to under a different manager, depending on the project change. So it's really dependent on the firm structure. It's dependent on your daily manager, your career manager, and your kind of leadership. But I also something that I noticed too, kind of in observing my experiences between the East Coast and the West Coast. And I mean, on the East Coast, it's people don't move around as much. To be at a firm for people stay at firms for a long time. They anything less than 5 or 6 years is kind of questioned almost, of like, oh, why are you moving around so much? And I've noticed out here it's people move around after 2-3 years. It's just a different style. And but one thing that I'll say is don't give up too soon. You want to find that balance between like advocating for yourself. If you feel like you're hitting a brick wall, do what you got to do. And you'll ultimately have to make the decision on whether it's the right move for you. But also, firms can change quickly with the wind on projects and the people that are there. So if people are also moving out and new projects are coming in and new people are coming in, all of a sudden a firm can feel very different from a couple years ago than to what it is currently. So do what's right for you. Just know that growth is a very personal journey, and just try to stick to it, but also know what's important to you.
And maybe just to add to something someone had told me a long time ago, and I still think about it and believe it, is to always be prepared for opportunities, because you just never know when you're going to get one. And even kind of to what you were saying, Lauren, like the growth changes, what you want out of your career changes. One year, you care about work-life balance. The next year you're like, no, I want to do this, and I want to work however long it takes to achieve it, kind of a thing. Things change. But to be ready for the opportunity for that to happen. You never know when one of your leaders is going to need somebody and they end up calling on you, and being ready to kind of meet that ask.
Totally. And similar to boundaries, where no one's going to tell you to instill boundaries. No one's going to tell you that an opportunity has opened.
Exactly.
You're going to have to try to notice it yourself. A lot of times it's when your leader or your manager is actually in a bind and they need support. Maybe they lost a senior designer, or maybe they lost a teammate, or something shifted and they're kind of in an oh crap moment. Some of the biggest opportunities are in those oh crap moments, to show that you can jump in and fill in, even if you're doing something a little bit out of your realm. That'll help you grow faster for sure.
Definitely. And we actually kind of talked about this a little bit too, at the dinner, where it was basically, I think we got on this topic, and I had kind of said at some point that people are just selfish beings, and that wasn't a criticism, but I said that because really, if you can help somebody, they're going to bring you along. Like if you're going to make them look good, they're going to make you look good. And, that's kind of like a weird dynamic to sort of get on board with. And, there's pros and cons to that concept, and there's, so you got to be careful with that. But that idea though, like you're saying, that if the opportunity is there, they're not always going to ask you. People aren't just going to reach out and say, hey, I'm in a bind, I need you to fix this. Like, let's make this happen. But if you're able to kind of seek out those opportunities where you think you might be able to do it, even if you don't succeed 100%, but that you're trying to do that I mean, people are naturally going to look at you as someone that they can depend on, or someone that they can ask to try and do their best, and that kind of thing. And people are just, leaders will always bring people with them that, you know, are going to help make them and the team, and then ultimately the firm, look good.
Yeah. You also have to kind of play that game and build relationships for the long term. You have to think about playing for the long game, because it might feel small in the moment to kind of jump in and support someone when they're in a bind, but they're never going to forget it. And even if they can't help you next month or even next year, again, they're never going to forget it. And who knows when in a couple years a door is going to open because of that initiative that you took a couple years ago.
Yeah. Oh, you guys, so many good tips that we've covered. I feel like we really did a great job of digging deep into some of the bigger topics that we talked about for the evening. So I'm just curious, if someone is interested in moving in San Francisco, give us a little bit about the San Francisco design community. What is it like? What are some of your favorite things about being a designer in San Francisco?
How long have you been here, Lauren?
Just about 5 years.
Okay, so we're about the same. Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, when I first moved out here, I was in search of diverse perspectives, and cultural diversity, and just kind of new thinking. And you will get that in loads in San Francisco in a good way. It's a huge hub for new thinking, especially if you're in a firm that embraces that kind of thinking and creativity. I think something that I underestimated, which I value so much going through it now, but I think something that I underestimated when I was in search of that is kind of knowing what comes with that is a lot of different communication styles and a lot of different team dynamics. And when you have people from all corners of the country or even the world, we have people from other countries in our studio too. Communication is everything, and just simple differences in communication can affect team dynamics. So I think also going through a little bit more patience, a little bit more clarity in your communication, knowing that new teams working together for the first time need to kind of go through that dating phase of being a new team, of trying to figure each other out. I think that happens in every firm, but also when you're in a very diverse city, a melting pot of cultures, there's just a little bit more time and clarity and empathy that needs to occur with teams. But ultimately, once you get through that, I mean, it'll be one of the strongest teams you've ever been on. So I think that's been a huge benefit of working in San Francisco. And also it's just a fantastic city. Anytime that reps can get together, you can get together with reps. I mean, there's the geography makes any activities and industry events that much more interesting too.
Yeah. I want to second the diverse voices in the room. Definitely, you know, it's something you have to be, you know, learn patience with at first, just in not being used to that coming into it. But it pays off in the long run. I mean, you really do get that perspective for just how people have different communication styles, different times of working, all sorts of stuff. So I want to second that. And I also want to say that something that I've really enjoyed as well, kind of similar, is the importance of things that architecture touches, not just how you build a building, but talking about biophilic design, or talking about SIPDID, or talking about ethics, you know, things like that, how we can help, you know, or unfortunately encourage, you know, homelessness or things like that. But how I think in particular, San Francisco really tries to, like a lot of the firms around here in particular, really try to take on these really personable or socioeconomic conversations that typically architecture has never really tried to tackle before. And so like there are things like putting together affordable housing toolkits or the climate action toolkit, all of these things that we try to do. And, you and I, Lauren and Kelsey and others, being a part of these conversations and trying to actually make that impact, I think is also unique to the San Francisco area, because I think we take on a sort of beta testing mentality, if I can use a tech word, right?
You got to use one tech word when you're in
right.
tech
Only
capital.
one. That's it. Used it. But taking on these things and doing a trial and error and testing them out and seeing how it works and then adjusting and redoing it again. I think that that's kind of ingrained in how we work as architects. And I actually think it's enjoyable. If you like that style, that's definitely here.
Yeah, absolutely. And building on that reminded me more on some of the more unique aspects of this area too, is people are just more open-minded towards topics like inclusive design, diversity and equity, and just sustainability in general. California is a big leader in sustainability. So out here, anyways, you don't have to convince anyone to value those things. Those are obvious. So that makes things a little bit easier in terms of working with clients. I think every firm has their own approach and whatnot, but in terms of valuing it, that's there. And that's, I think, a really amazing part of the design community here in San Francisco, is that's always going to be of high value.
Yeah.
Oh, well, awesome. Thank you so much, Ammee and Lauren, for sharing your wisdom. I know someone out there, maybe even the listener today, is going to have so many great takeaways. So thank you so much for being part of the Network Next Gen crew, and loved having you there at our San Francisco dinner. So we'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Lauren. This was great.
Talk to you.
Okay. Right. So we'll talk soon. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.